Good morning, everyone. It's terrific to be with you. Vermeer is a proud member of the Iowa manufacturing community, but also we are a very proud resident of the community of Ames. We've had a facility at the Iowa State Research Park for many years, and also our relationship with Iowa State is our strongest university relationship of any school. So it's terrific to be with all of you here in Ames. Our headquarters is in Pella, Iowa, as you may know. But in addition to our facility in the research park here in Ames, we also acquired a factory in Griswold, Iowa, a few years ago called Schuler Manufacturer. They make mixing wagons, forage mixing wagons. So we actually have 3 locations now within the state of Iowa. So always been an Iowa company and continue to be very proud to be an Iowa company. I know Vermeer well. I often will tell people that I've been with Vermeer for 19 years or my entire life, depending on how you look at it. This man is my grandfather, Gary Vermeer. He started Vermeer 76 years ago. The story of the start of Vermeer is a classic entrepreneur, innovator story. In the mid-1940s, on my grandfather's farm, my grandfather built a mechanical wagon hoist for his own use to make unloading grain from a wagon easier. And his neighbors saw it and said, "Hey, would you build one of those for me?" And pretty quick, he had enough demand that he needed to hire somebody. And that was the start of Vermeer. I will often tell people, you know, it wasn't a business plan competition in business school. It wasn't something that, you know, he and his friends talked over. Not that any of those things are bad, but the start of Vermeer was just simply my grandfather building a machine for his own use and his neighbors seeing it and saying, "Hey, would you build one of those for me?" And that was the start of Vermeer. And a theme that you will hear throughout the entire history of Vermeer is trying to take additional effort out of the work on our customers' job sites. Is a theme that has gone throughout Vermeer for 76 years and counting. I had a tremendous relationship with my grandfather for 30 years or more than 30 years. He spent the majority of the summer up in Canada fishing. And he used a float plane to go to remote lakes. And already at the age of about 6, I would go up to Canada with my cousins for 1 week per year. And for many years, that was a perk for Vermeer team members to go up to Canada and fish with my grandfather for a few days. And later on in his life, my grandfather could no longer get his medical certificate to fly and started hiring pilots. And for 5 years, I was his primary pilot, flying for him up in Canada. So all the respect in the world for my grandfather. I helped my grandfather build a cabin in Canada. And as we were coming back from a beach to get sand to build the footings for the cabin, that is when I decided I was going to major in engineering. So my grandfather was incredibly impactful in my life in a lot of ways. I always assumed that I would want to come and work for the company that has his name on the buildings, his name on the side of the machines. I'm also very proud, not only am I proud to be third generation family CEO of the company my grandfather started, but many of you in this room may know my mother, Mary Andringa, my immediate predecessor in the role of CEO, also my uncle Bob Vermeer, very involved in the Iowa business community for many, many years. But in particular, it's pretty unusual in manufacturing to have a male, female, male succession plan, and also have a tremendous relationship with my mother and very proud to be her successor in the role of CEO. You know, my grandfather founded the company. My uncle and my mother both served in the role of CEO, and I'm now proud to be third generation family CEO of Vermeer. We continue to be a 100% family held company by descendants of my grandfather and his brother. And we have chosen to be quite inclusive when it comes to stock ownership within the Vermeer family. But yet fairly exclusive when it comes to working in the business. We have a family employment policy that you work outside of the company for a period of time before potentially coming back into the company. For people who aspire to upper level leadership at Vermeer, we acquire a graduate degree in something applicable to Vermeer. So my sister works at Vermeer. My relationship with my sister is phenomenal. She is our vice president of manufacturing, and really the fact that our skill sets and our aspirations within the company gel so well, I believe is part of why our relationship is as strong as it is. Very proud once again to not only be the successor of my mother, but also to be a third generation family member leading Vermeer along with my sister. You can't get too far within the story of Vermeer before talking about what we call our 4P philosophy, our timeless values at Vermeer. These are things that will never change at Vermeer. I like to show it this way with principles at the center. The golden rule, treating other people like you would want to be treated yourself. I like to show people as our top P. Some of you may be aware, maybe many of you are aware, that we got hit by a bad tornado in 2018, and there were 400 vehicles destroyed, 400 personal vehicles destroyed, 2 large buildings completely destroyed, several other buildings heavily damaged. But that night, we knew that we had no serious physical injuries and no fatalities, which around Vermeer is called either the Vermeericle or the Miracle on the Mile, because we call our facility the Vermeer Mile. And I often will talk about the fact that that night we knew we could come back better and stronger than ever before because we had all of our people. We had taken a massive hit to our facilities. Facilities can be rebuilt. We had a really tremendous result with our insurer. Our insurer was a partner with us throughout. Buildings can be rebuilt, vehicles can be replaced. When you have your people, you've got everything you need to come back better and stronger than ever before. So I really like showing people as our top P. And then the other 2 Ps, kind of the base of Vermeer maybe, product. Ever since my grandfather built a mechanical wagon hoist for his own use, innovative products for the unique markets that we serve has been our number one core competency, our number one brand pillar at Vermeer. And then profit. We don't shy away at all from needing to be a profitable company so we can continue to reinvest back in the company. The tornado is another good example of the advantages of being a profitable company so you can reinvest back in your business. After the tornado, like I said, very favorable insurance result. And yet at the same time, we reinvested tens of millions of dollars additionally, in addition to what we got from insurance, back into our business. And 6 years later, I would never wish something like the tornado on my worst enemy. And yet at the same time, without a doubt, we were able to turn that natural disaster into something that has proven to be very favorable for Vermeer in the long run. I like to tell the entire history of Vermeer based on just the 4 products, which are kind of small pictures, but there's screens all around the room, so hopefully you can find a screen fairly close to you. I talked about the fact that Vermeer started with my grandfather building a mechanical wagon hoist for his own use in the mid-1940s when labor was difficult to find post-World War II. And hydraulic wagon hoists almost immediately rendered the mechanical wagon hoist obsolete, but my grandfather, being a natural inventor, as a person who was constantly thinking about how to make work easier on the farm, my grandfather already in the 1950s started to build power takeoff driven tiling trenchers to install drainage tile for low-lying farm fields. Obviously, Iowa not only has an incredible heritage when it comes to manufacturing, but obviously incredibly strong heritage with regards to agriculture. And really all of the initial inventions or innovation that you can trace our entire history back to all started on the farm. Even though the majority of the Vermeer business today is what we call the industrial side of the business, you can trace all of our initial innovation back to the farm. So in the 50s, we were already building power takeoff driven tiling trenchers for low-lying farm fields. And that is the start, that is the genesis of about 50% of our business today, which is what we call the industrial or utility side of the business. Also in the 1950s, the idea came to Vermeer from a local area farmer to build a stump cutter. And once again, Iowa was undergoing a substantial transformation into agriculture at that point, a continued substantial transformation into agriculture. So when land was cleared, they would have the challenge of those stumps still being out there. And there was really no easy way to get those stumps out. So the idea of a stump cutter came to Vermeer. We built a prototype. It's one of the legendary stories of Vermeer. The initial prototype was to push a drum forward and backward over the stump. And as my grandfather tells the story, somebody hit the wrong lever and it swung side to side, and it was 5 times more effective that way. So oftentimes when I speak to engineers, I like to say that story and just say, hey, you may think you've got the answer. That's great. I hope you do. But always be open-minded to trying your idea a slightly different way, because you might be surprised at it being more effective in a slightly different way. So the invention of the stump cutter is the origin of about 30% of the Vermeer business, what we call the environmental part of the business. And then my grandfather's most iconic invention is the round baler. And a lot of people in Iowa, in particular, believe that Vermeer started with the round baler. Actually, Vermeer had been in existence for more than 20 years before my grandfather was on a walk with a neighbor, and that neighbor said he was going to get out of raising cattle because he was so tired of finding the labor to put hay up in the top of a barn, to put hay up. And my grandfather said, if I were to build a machine that would make a round bale, so you can leave the hay out in the field, therefore when it rains on it, it sheds the vast majority of the moisture, would that solve your problem? And his neighbor said yes. And a week later, I think Vermeer had a prototype of a baler. So what we call the forage part of our business is less than 20% of the Vermeer business overall, but we continue to be very proud of that little niche of agriculture that we continue to play in. Round baling, and then other equipment that complements round balers. Mention a couple other things. A few years ago, we did a brand study, and out of that brand study, we came out of that with the tagline, "Equipped to do more," which we continue to leverage, and then also our promise to our customers, which is to make a real impact on our customers' productivity and profitability. So that was a little bit really kind of the history of Vermeer, which brings us up to this point. And now I'll spend a little bit of time talking about Vermeer's total footprint. We are a global company. We've been a global company for pretty much our entire history. My grandfather with Dutch heritage, with the name Vermeer being a Dutch name. The Netherlands was obviously a very straightforward first location for my grandfather to expand into internationally. So we've had a footprint in the Netherlands for more than 50 years of our 70-year history. And this shows the locations of where Vermeer has a company-owned facility throughout the United States and around the world. We sell exclusively through dealers. We have an industrial dealer network, and then we also have an ag dealer network. So these would just be the facilities that are owned by Vermeer. To spend a little bit of time sharing Vermeer's footprint, the Vermeer Mile in Pella is overwhelmingly our headquarters. There is no close number 2, frankly, in comparison to the Vermeer Mile. We have about 2 million square feet worth of office and production space in Pella. Talked about the fact that we have a facility just probably a mile away as a bird flies, maybe a 1.5 mile drive from here in the Ames Research Park. We're very happy to have that facility. It's a great way for us to work on advanced technologies and also to maintain our strong relationship with Iowa State. This gives you a little bit of an overview of our manufacturing footprint. We have 2 locations that manufacture within Iowa, and then we have 6 other manufacturing facilities. 2 of them are overseas, one in China and we now actually assemble in the Netherlands as well. And then throughout the United States, we have a facility in South Dakota, and in Greenville, South Carolina, which is actually by far our second biggest facility, focused on a product line. I'll get to that in just a little bit. And then we have a facility in Florida as well. Our strategic roadmap, we do every 3 years. We do a 3-year strategic cycle, and our current strategic roadmap, we show our timeless values, the 4 Ps at the bottom, kind of like the base of our strategy. And the biggest boxes there in the middle are what we call our brand pillars, the things that we feel like we have done better than the competition in the past, and we're going to continue to do better going forward into the future. And then our 2 strategic priorities for this current 3-year cycle are to grow global capability and easier work by design. I could spend a little bit of time later talking about each of those, but in general, global capability is about trying to optimize the footprint that we currently have to increase that capability. We doubled over a 5-year period from about 2018 until about 2023. We've leveled off in volume this year, and next year we also anticipate being fairly flat with comparison to this year. So it's a tremendous opportunity to look at the footprint that we built at kind of a breakneck pace over the last 5 years and to optimize that footprint. And then easier work by design, when we rolled it out to the team, I said, hey, my grandfather built a mechanical wagon hoist to make work easier by design. Vermeer is credited with the invention of the stump cutter to make work easier by design. My grandfather invented the round hay baler to make work easier by design. We're still talking about designing and building machines to make work easier by design, but even more than that, we are looking at artificial intelligence, we're looking at data as an asset, we're looking at tools to take the extra effort out of work for our customers, for our dealers, and for Vermeer team members. That is what that effort is more about. I'm going to give you just a little bit of overview of the different parts of the Vermeer business. Life cycle is everything that happens after the sale of the initial whole good. For many decades, Vermeer was a whole good focused company. We were focused on designing new machines, building new machines, and didn't put a lot of effort into strengthening that relationship with our customer after the initial sale of the machine, taking good care of that customer so that when the machine is ready to be traded for a new machine, the customer wouldn't think anything other than replacing it with another Vermeer machines. And Vermeer machines, in general, get the crap beat out of them in their role as machines on our customers' job sites. So if our customers are using their machines, even if they're not replacing them this year, they will fairly soon have to replace them because most Vermeer machines live a pretty tough life in the environment where they work until it's time to trade them for a new machine. Ford side of the business, like I said, started with the invention of the round baler in 1971. Gives you a little bit of an idea of the scope of the Ford side of the business. Different products that complement round baling. Round baling continues to be the center of what we do. Environmental, I mentioned earlier, is about 30% of the Vermeer business overall. A variety of different products in this area. Tree care rental landscape started with the invention of the stump cutter and has expanded into brush chippers and skid steers. And then recycling and forestry, big wood grinders, trommel screens. Frankly, thoughts and prayers, of course, go out to everyone affected in Florida and the Southeast with Helene, followed up just 2 weeks later by Milton. And obviously, massive human suffering and property loss, etc. But at Vermeer, these 2 product areas, tree care rental landscape and recycling and forestry, are big parts of recovery from natural disasters like what has just happened in Florida. And as much as we wish for the sake of the people involved that it wouldn't happen, we are very proud to be able to be part of the recovery effort. It's our customers that do the work. It's our customers that have the contracts with FEMA to either go in there immediately and open roads so that you can get access to people, or in the longer term to bring together massive piles, massive areas of organic waste and process that organic waste into a usable material after the fact. So then finally, the largest piece of the Vermeer business is what we call the infrastructure side of the business. The picture right there is a solar post driver. For several years, that was the fastest growing part of the Vermeer business. It's really the portfolio of the Vermeer business that is one of our strengths, to be able to ramp up for a product group that doubled year over year for several years in a row and is now down 80%, with the possibility that in just a year or two, it might once again be the star of the Vermeer business. We can absorb that type of volatility into Vermeer because we serve about 10 different end markets, many of which have different dynamics as to what is driving the business. Overall, the largest and most substantial part of the Vermeer business is what we call the utility business. Once again, started with the development of power takeoff driven tiling trenchers back in the 1950s. We continue to build trenchers to this day, and the most important product for Vermeer is what we call horizontal directional drilling. You've undoubtedly seen these machines. We could talk about it in more detail, but horizontal directional drilling and trenching is used to put in any underground infrastructure. So at times in the past, it's been very dependent on fiber optic. Certainly during the pandemic, when everybody was trying to either work from home or do school from home, there was another massive push for fiber. The area which is most strongly driving this right now is the underground installation of electrical infrastructure. And once again, the two hurricanes that just hit the southeast highlight the need for putting electrical infrastructure underground where it's much more resilient. But water infrastructure has been and will likely continue to be a big part of the work that Vermeer machines do to install underground infrastructure. Natural gas, oil infrastructure, hopefully eventually carbon pipelines. You know, those will be some of the future uses of these machines going forward. So yeah, this gives you a little bit of a sense of what we call a pipeline size machine. So when we talk about the bigger rigs, it's bigger diameter underground infrastructure, typically undergrounding of electric infrastructure, oil, natural gas, water. Eventually the carbon pipelines will probably be a little bit bigger diameter infrastructure. Specialty excavation, the main picture there is the largest piece of mobile equipment ever built in the state of Iowa. So that is a surface mining machine. Once again, the story of Vermeer getting into surface mining is a pretty cool story. We had been building trenchers for trenching in rock for decades, and it was actually our dealer in Italy that said, hey, why don't you put a drum on the front of that machine, and my customers could use that to prep the land for planting vineyards. So the initial use case of the terrain leveler, what we call the terrain leveler or the surface miner, was to do site preparation for vineyards. And we quickly found out that it could be used to mill out limestone for things like a harbor in a city. And then pretty quickly we pivoted toward surface mining being the best use for that. So the types of materials that tend to be particularly amenable toward this technique for mining are things like iron ore, which is the raw material for steel. We've sold a bunch of these machines into West Australia and also Brazil and Chile. Bauxite, which is the raw material for aluminum. Lithium, which has been a case study in commodity volatility over the last few years. So lithium, of course, the raw material for lithium batteries, and then things like iodine as well, which is a important material for human needs. So it's just one of the things that Vermeer has had a hallmark with in the past, and we hope to continue to leverage that hallmark, that we're open to ideas from anyone. Our Italian dealer happens to be a very highly regarded dealer, and so, you know, maybe it was a little bit of an unfair advantage. Maybe not every dealer would we have built a prototype machine if he had this idea, but you know, not only are we, you know, looking forward to the ideas that any one of 4,500 Vermeer team members come up with, but also we probably have a comparable number of people within dealerships that are focused on Vermeer every day, and then of course thousands of customers using Vermeer machines every day. So in preparing for this talk, I was provided with kind of 3 starter questions to maybe make a few comments on, and then certainly I'm happy to flesh any of these out in more detail, or we can talk about any other questions that you have. So the first one was, from the perspective of a global large legacy manufacturing company, how do I see the current state of manufacturing? It's interesting. Certainly the answer is different right now than it was over a 5-year period, kind of post-COVID, or, you know, 3 to 4 year period post-COVID. We had a 5-year stretch, and I think many manufacturers were in line with this, where we had backlogs well beyond what we could produce. And so for several years post-COVID, our number one constraints, our number one needs were supply chain and workforce. And yeah, we told our community colleges and the high schools and the universities that we need students with the skills that we need as quick as you can possibly churn them out. And supply chain post-COVID was very, very challenging for several years, right up until probably 9 to 12 months ago. So for Vermeer, like I mentioned, we've kind of flattened out. I do believe that both the interest rate cut that occurred recently in September, and couple that with clarity post-election, either way, I just think clarity post-election will put a little bit of confidence back into the markets that we serve. Customers will be more confident with what they have in front of them. So the state of manufacturing today is stable from Vermeer's perspective, and a lot of the colleagues that I interact with at the National Association of Manufacturers, the Association of Equipment Manufacturers, would probably say, you know, 10 to 20% down this year in comparison to last year is not unusual, but for sure, when I think about Vermeer, the type of work that we do, the installation of infrastructure, being part of the food supply, being part of agriculture, being part of cleaning up organic waste, feel positive. I continue to feel positive about the long-term trajectory of those markets. Question about automation and artificial intelligence. We could certainly talk about this for a long time. So I'll take automation first, and I'll talk about it from both the perspective of designing machines for automation, but also using automation at Vermeer. I think if I was going to summarize it in one sentence, I would say nothing is a silver bullet. And that probably goes for artificial intelligence as well. So at Vermeer, we have you know, publicly displayed and showed customers 2 different products that rely on automation. One is what we call BaleHawk. It is an autonomous bale picker-upper. So when farmers round bale material in the field, if they want to move those bales, one of the most difficult jobs to fill is to get the people to go out and pick up all those bales and stack them on the side of the field if you're going to move those bales. We've designed essentially a robot to go out there and pick all those bales up and bring them to the side of the road. It's an exciting product. It's a labor-saving product. It's easier work by design. We're dipping our toes into automation as far as providing solutions to our customers that involve automation. When we talk about automation at Vermeer, for years we've had autonomous guided vehicles to bring supply from what we call our supermarket, kind of our central living warehouse, to our production facilities. It's been a mixed bag. It seems as though we spend just as much effort programming and optimizing those machines as the value we get out of them. So yeah, once again, and I would say the same thing about robotic welding. We are trying to implement robotic welding and eventually robotic painting, but the amount of time we put in programming and then kind of troubleshooting and re-optimizing those tools is quite substantial. And so yeah, I think the summary continues to be for automation, particularly when it comes to automation that we're implementing at Vermeer, nothing is a silver bullet. We certainly have found valuable use cases that we continue to roll out, but it's a challenge to get more value than the effort you put into it. Artificial intelligence is obviously a huge topic. We are trying to find the balance point at Vermeer of not constraining ourselves from a tool that will save a lot of time and be very helpful, and yet at the same time protect ourselves. Many of you may know that artificial intelligence are trained on massive data sets, and we just want to make sure that our proprietary information doesn't become part of those massive data sets. And as many of you may know, in artificial intelligence, if someone were to, with good intentions, feed one of our proprietary data sets into an AI tool, there's no getting it back. And it might have been completely well-intentioned, but once it's done once, it's gone forever. An interesting note to share with all of you, I think it's interesting for the state of Iowa, and some of you may know this. I heard recently that when you put a query into ChatGPT versus putting that same query into Google to do a Google search, the ChatGPT query takes 10 times more energy. So particularly for Iowa, that is going to be impactful going forward. It's no secret, Iowa is a very favorable location to build data centers. We have relatively inexpensive energy, and we also have relatively prevalent water. And those are the two things that are needed for big data centers. So based on the fact that getting your answer from ChatGPT takes 10 times more energy in general than getting your answer from Google, has implications for the state. When I think about Vermeer, we of course are enthusiastic to be part of installing all of that ramp up in energy infrastructure going forward. But it's going to be interesting to see how this plays out going forward. Future of manufacturing in our state, nation, et cetera, really kind of answered that one in that first question, and that is that after years of breakneck pace, we've kind of leveled out. I really think clarity post-election is going to help kind of get the footing under us again. From my perspective, regardless of who becomes president, there's going to be some really nice opportunities that a company like Vermeer can leverage and capture going forward, and I think that's the case for most manufacturers. So feel like the state of manufacturing within Iowa and within the country is pretty sound in the long run.